Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Sharon frets, Mariah's crisis, and Holden's somber discovery. Spoilers for Monday, August 11th, 2025, from The Young and the Restless are available. Fans may anticipate Mariah Copeland causing Sharon Newman anxiety. In the meantime, Nathan Owen's character Holden Novak comes to a sobering realization. Additionally, there will be Jack Abbott, who asks Victoria Newman for assistance. Let's discuss the upcoming events in the CBS soap opera as you continue reading. The crisis of Mariah Copeland. Let's begin with Mariah, who continues to struggle with a significant mystery. Fans don't know the answer, but Mariah does. On a work trip, the redhead became wasted and flirted with an older man. Mariah then murdered him. She was undoubtedly shaken and frightened when she returned to Genoa City. She won't discuss it with Sharon or Tessa Porter, though. Even after Tessa threatened to dissolve the marriage, Mariah refused to discuss it. Sharon will keep worrying about Mariah in the interim. Mariah's life is getting worse rather than better by keeping this a secret. Sharon Newman is upset. To get Mariah to talk, Sharon might try to get in touch with her. The therapist even recommended that Mariah speak with someone else. But Mariah is adamant that discussing it is unsafe. Expect Mariah's mental health to deteriorate as she continues to conceal this information. The discovery of Holden Novak. According to Monday, August 11th spoilers for The Young and the Restless, Holden will come to a sobering realization. Lily Winters determines that Holden should be the next to find out about Damian Kane's passing now that everyone has returned to Genoa City. Holden didn't want his old best buddy to die, even if he and Damian had a falling out prior to the trip to Nice. Holden may be significantly impacted by this. Might it also have an impact on Holden's covert agreement with Billy Flynn's character Kane Ashby? Victoria Newman and Jack Abbott's pact. Jack had been conflicted about giving Jabot to Jason Thompson's character, Billy Abbott. Jack goes to speak with Victoria about the Kane situation. Even though Victoria has always supported Team Newman, she might concur that they should present a unified front. In the past, the families of Abbott and Newman have come together to defeat a greater threat. Is there anything comparable we could see? Ack was worried about Victor's response to his offer to work together. The Abbott patriarch may therefore attempt to enlist Victoria's assistance in that regard. Genoa City was no stranger to secrets, but lately, the air felt thicker with tension, as if every conversation carried a hidden weight. Every glance hinted at an unspoken truth. Sharon Newman had been through countless storms, her own mental health battles, the cancer diagnosis, the countless breakups, reconciliations, and betrayals, yet nothing gnawed at her quite like the cold distance in her daughter Mariah Copeland's eyes. Sharon's worry wasn't born from overprotectiveness. It came from a gut-deep maternal instinct that something was very, very wrong. Mariah's once vibrant energy had dimmed into nervous silences and evasive smiles, a hollow cheerfulness that rang false to anyone paying close enough attention. Sharon had offered therapy sessions, gentle conversations over coffee at Crimson Lights, even suggested that Mariah confide in a third party if she didn't feel comfortable speaking to her or Tessa Porter. But every time, Mariah had deflected with the same cryptic refrain, "It's not safe to talk about it." That sentence alone had kept Sharon awake for nights, pacing her living room and replaying every recent moment in her mind, desperate to understand what it was. What Sharon didn't know, and what Mariah couldn't bring herself to say, was that the secret was darker than anyone could imagine. During a recent business trip, after one too many glasses of wine in a hotel lounge, Mariah had found herself laughing and leaning in toward an older gentleman, distinguished, silver-haired, with a sharp wit and a twinkle in his eye that reminded her of the confidence she used to carry. Their conversation had started innocently enough, but when his hand lingered too long on hers, when his compliments shifted from charming to possessive, Mariah felt a sudden unease. The details after that were fragmented in her mind, heated words, a shove, a stumble, the sickening sound of impact when his head met the sharp corner of a marble table. She remembered kneeling beside him, her breath catching at the sight of blood, her shaking hands hovering over his chest as if willing him to breathe again. By the time she realized there was no pulse, panic had already gripped her throat, and instinct had taken over. She wiped the glass, moved his body just enough to make it look like a tragic accident, and fled the scene. Now, back in Genoa City, that night was a shadow that followed her everywhere. Every creak of a door, every unfamiliar number on her phone, every siren in the distance felt like the moment her life would unravel. Tessa, growing frustrated with Mariah's withdrawal, had issued an ultimatum: open up or watch their marriage collapse. But even that hadn't cracked Mariah's resolve. To her, speaking the truth wasn't an option. It was a death sentence, not only for her freedom but for the fragile safety she believed she was clinging to. Elsewhere in town, Holden Novak was about to face his own life-altering blow. He'd barely had time to unpack from the disastrous trip to Nice when Lily Winters appeared at his door, her expression a mix of sympathy and apprehension. She wasted no time in delivering the news: Damian Kane was dead. For a moment, Holden just stared at her, the words hanging in the air like smoke, unreal and suffocating. Despite the bitter fallout between him and Damian, Holden had never wished harm on his former best friend. Memories of late-night brainstorming sessions, shared victories, and even the fiery arguments that came from two strong personalities clashing flooded his mind. Their last encounter had been ugly: accusations, slammed doors, and the kind of words you couldn't take back. And now, there would be no chance to fix it. The grief hit him in unexpected waves, tangled with guilt and an unsettling curiosity about how Damian had died. Lily offered few details, but Holden sensed there was more to the story, something that tied directly into the volatile business dealings that had been simmering beneath the surface for months. That suspicion only deepened when he remembered his own secret agreement with Kane Ashby, a pact that could crumble under the weight of Damian's death, depending on what came to light. If the wrong person connected the dots, Holden's career, reputation, and perhaps even his freedom could be on the line. Meanwhile, across town, Jack Abbott was pacing in his office, the weight of Jabot's future pressing on him like a vice. His brother Billy had been pushing for more control, but the Kane situation had complicated everything. Jack knew Kane's ambition could be dangerous, even lethal, if left unchecked, and with corporate alliances shifting like sand in a storm, he needed a strategy that went beyond boardroom politics. That's what led him to Victoria Newman's door. The two had a complicated history, moments of cooperation overshadowed by fierce rivalry, but Jack believed they shared a common enemy this time. Victoria listened intently as Jack laid out his concerns, her sharp mind already running through the possibilities. The idea of an Abbott-Newman alliance wasn't new. They had joined forces before when a greater threat loomed. But this was different. Jack wasn't just proposing a temporary truce. He was suggesting a calculated partnership to neutralize Kane's influence before it consumed both families' empires. Victoria's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. She knew her father, Victor Newman, would be a wild card in this equation. Victor's grudges were legendary, and his willingness to work with Jack would depend entirely on whether he saw the value, and the leverage, in doing so. Still, Victoria understood the stakes. Kane was smart, resourceful, and ruthless when backed into a corner, and recent events suggested he was building alliances of his own, ones that could tip the balance of power in Genoa City if left unchecked. As Jack and Victoria discussed strategy, the unspoken question lingered between them. Could they convince Victor to set aside his ego long enough to fight alongside the Abbotts? The answer would determine whether their plan was a masterstroke or a disaster waiting to happen. Back at Crimson Lights, Sharon sat at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a cooling mug of tea, her eyes scanning the door every time it opened, hoping it would be Mariah walking in ready to talk. Holden, still reeling from Lily's revelation, wandered in, looking pale and distracted. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, there was an understanding. Both carried burdens too heavy to name, both were standing at the edge of secrets that could shatter lives. The crisis was building, threads tightening, pulling every character toward a reckoning they couldn't yet see coming. In the days ahead, Holden's discovery, Sharon's fretting, Jack's alliance talks, and Mariah's spiraling guilt would converge in ways that no one in Genoa City was prepared for, and when the truth finally broke free, the fallout would be nothing short of catastrophic. The bell above the door at Crimson Lights jingled again, and Sharon's gaze instinctively lifted, her pulse quickening at the thought it might finally be Mariah. Instead, it was Tessa, shoulders tense, scanning the cafe before making a beeline for Sharon's table. The moment she sat down, Sharon could tell she'd reached her breaking point. Tessa's voice was low but intense as she confided that she could no longer handle the emotional wall Mariah had built. It's like she's disappearing right in front of me, Sharon. I don't know how to reach her anymore, she admitted, twisting her wedding band nervously. Sharon's worry deepened. She knew how dangerous isolation could be. Once a secret became the center of someone's life, it didn't just weigh them down, it rewired them. She decided right then she couldn't wait for Mariah to come to her. She would go to her daughter, confront her, and risk pushing too hard if it meant breaking through whatever was consuming her. Across town, Holden sat in his apartment, Damian's death replaying in his mind like a broken record. Lily's delivery of the news had been straightforward, but her eyes had flickered just enough to tell him she was holding something back. He poured himself a drink, letting the burn chase away some of the numbness. His mind drifted back to the last deal he and Kane Ashby had discussed before the trip to Nice, a deal that had required careful secrecy. Kane had assured him Damian was a complication they could manage. Now, with Damian gone, the phrase took on a sinister edge. Holden reached for his phone, thumb hovering over Kane's number. He wasn't sure if he wanted answers or just to hear Kane's tone to judge for himself whether the man had blood on his hands. After a moment, he hit call. Kane answered on the third ring, his voice smooth but carrying an undercurrent of impatience. Holden. Was wondering when you'd check in. That casual greeting made Holden's skin crawl. Damian's dead, Holden said flatly. Kane's pause was brief, calculated. Yeah, I heard. Shame. Shame. That was all. Holden's jaw tightened. You wouldn't happen to know how that happened, would you? Kane chuckled softly, a sound that felt as cold as the glass in Holden's hand. Some people make their own enemies, mate. And enemies have a way of handling things. Holden didn't press further, not yet. But in that moment, he knew two things. Kane was playing a dangerous game, and if Holden stayed in it, he might be next on the board. Meanwhile, Jack Abbott left Victoria Newman's office with the beginnings of a plan. Their conversation had been cautiously productive. Victoria agreed that Kane's growing influence needed to be curbed, but she also made it clear she wouldn't move forward without testing her father's reaction first. Jack knew Victor Newman well enough to anticipate the resistance. The man didn't like sharing power, and he certainly didn't like being told where the battlefield was. Jack's gamble was that Victoria could frame the alliance as an offensive maneuver that protected Newman Enterprises' dominance while ensuring Jabot wasn't destabilized in the process. Still, Jack's gut told him they'd need more than corporate logic to sway Victor. They'd need to appeal to his personal sense of vengeance. That opportunity arrived sooner than expected. Later that day, Victor overheard a conversation between two Newman board members about Kane's quiet takeover tactics in certain international markets. Though they spoke in vague terms, the implication was clear: Kane was moving into spaces Victor considered his own territory. By the time Victoria brought the proposal to her father that evening, Victor was already primed. "You're suggesting I work with Jack Abbott?" Victor asked, his voice carrying that familiar edge of amusement and challenge. Victoria held his gaze, unflinching. "I'm suggesting we work with him, temporarily, to stop someone who could hurt both our companies if we don't." Victor leaned back, studying his daughter. He didn't give his answer right away, but the glint in his eye suggested he was at least considering it. Back in the quiet of the Newman ranch, Nick stopped by for an unplanned visit. He found Victor in the study, swirling a glass of scotch. "You thinking about saying yes to Jack?" Nick asked, cutting straight to the point. Victor didn't answer immediately, instead posing his own question. "What do you know about Kane Ashby's dealings with Holden Novak?" Nick frowned. The fact that his father was connecting those dots told him Kane's reach was broader than most realized. "Not much," Nick admitted. "But I've heard whispers. Holden's a wild card. And if Kane's banking on him..." He trailed off, letting the implication speak for itself. Victor nodded slowly, filing away the information. He had decisions to make and enemies to outmaneuver. While Genoa City's power players circled each other in boardrooms and private studies, Mariah sat in her car outside her mother's house, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. She'd driven there 3 times in the last week, intending to knock on the door, confess everything, and beg for guidance. But every time, she imagined Sharon's face when she heard the truth: the disappointment, the fear, the possibility she might see her own daughter as a killer, and she'd driven away instead. This time, she almost made it up the walk before her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She froze, answering with a hesitant hello. The voice on the other end was low, male, and unfamiliar. You were in Nice 2 weeks ago. It wasn't a question. Mariah's heart pounded in her ears. I don't know what you're talking about, she lied. The voice didn't argue. We should talk. Face to face. Tonight. Then the line went dead. Sharon, who had been looking out her front window and happened to see Mariah's car pull away yet again, felt a familiar frustration boil up. She grabbed her keys and followed, determined to catch her daughter before she vanished into another cloud of excuses. When she finally caught up with her at a red light, she honked, motioning for Mariah to pull over. Mariah complied reluctantly, rolling down her window just enough for Sharon to lean in. Sweetheart, please. Whatever it is, you don't have to go through it alone, Sharon pleaded. Mariah's eyes darted away, glassy with unshed tears. It's not about trust, Mom. It's about safety. For both of us. Before Sharon could respond, the light turned green, and Mariah pulled away, leaving her mother standing helpless on the curb. Later that night, Holden couldn't shake his unease about Kane's cryptic comments. He decided to dig into Damian's final days, starting with some calls to mutual contacts. What he heard made his blood run cold. Damian had been meeting with a third party in Nice, someone linked to a European conglomerate with a reputation for using extreme measures to eliminate competition. One source even hinted that Damian had been planning to double-cross someone close to him. The more Holden pieced together, the more he realized that Kane had likely known about the betrayal in advance and perhaps even leveraged it to his own advantage. The idea that he'd been a pawn in Kane's larger game ignited a slow-burning anger in Holden's chest. Meanwhile, Victoria updated Jack on her father's tentative interest in the alliance. Jack was careful not to appear overly eager, instead suggesting they identify Kane's weakest link and exploit it. If we can force him to defend from 2 fronts at once, he'll make mistakes, Jack reasoned. Victoria agreed but added that they'd need to control the narrative in the press to avoid backlash. Jack smirked. You handle your media channels, I'll handle mine. Kane won't know what hit him. But Kane wasn't oblivious. Word of Jack and Victoria's meeting had already reached him through his own network of informants. Sitting in his penthouse, Kane smiled faintly as he sipped a drink, almost amused. So they are teaming up, he murmured to himself. Good. Makes the game more interesting. He placed a call to an associate, instructing them to keep Holden on a short leash and remind Mariah that loose ends are dangerous. The mention of Mariah's name hinted at a connection she didn't even realize existed, one that could explain the mysterious call she'd received earlier. By midnight, Mariah found herself in a dimly lit parking garage, waiting for the man from the phone call. Her heart raced with each echoing footstep, every shadow stretching too long under the flickering lights. When he finally emerged from the stairwell, his face stayed hidden beneath the brim of a baseball cap. You don't know me, he began. But I know what happened in Nice. I know it wasn't just an accident. Mariah swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you want? The man stepped closer, his tone chillingly calm. Right now? Just for you to remember that the truth has a price. And if you're not careful, someone you love might end up paying it. In the span of just a few days, the separate threads of Genoa City's quiet chaos had begun to intertwine. Holden's suspicion of Kane, Sharon's desperate attempts to reach Mariah, Jack and Victoria's dangerous pact, and Kane's quiet, calculating moves in the background. Each step forward for one player shifted the ground beneath another, and as the city slept, the game was moving toward a point of no return. The crisis was no longer looming on the horizon. It was here, threading through every whispered conversation, every sideways glance, every decision made in the shadows. And by the time the sun rose again, some of those choices would be irreversible.